have to talk about this article, and every single person needs to read every single word of it. The woman who wrote this article, and it's called The Free Press, her name is Jamie Reed. She is a super progressive political person. She is married to a trans man, and up until last year, she worked in a pediatric gender clinic where she worked with so-called transgender kids to figure out what was going on and move them towards surgeries, hormone blockers, and all that stuff. Until she couldn't do it anymore, and now she's blowing the whistle. And the stuff that she writes about in this article is so damning and so disgusting that I think every person in the United States needs to read this. She talks about how there was such little oversight and so few questions for kids coming in for their surgeries and their hormone blockers. And she said she was the only one asking questions. And when she did ask questions, she got called judgmental and was ultimately giving warnings for what she was saying and doing. She talks about how a huge chunk of the kids coming into the clinic were autistic, or had some kind of some kind of condition like that. After she left the clinic, she was told to just be quiet and keep your head down. But she says it was too morally and medically appalling to stay silent. Started at the clinic in 2018. She said she was getting about 10 calls a month about kids experiencing so-called gender dysphoria and all of that. By 2022, when she left, she was getting 50 calls a week, and she said about 70% or more were girls, which is completely opposite from what it was just 4 years before. Many of the kids that came in would also profess that they had other disorders like Tourettes Syndrome or things like that they didn't actually have, and no one believed they had. And yet everyone believed that they had gender dysphoria just because they said it. She talks about the extreme and lifelong side effects of the hormone blockers and the medicines these kids are getting. She tells the story of one girl who decided to go all the way. She had top surgery, and then a couple years later, she came back and said, I'm not a boy anymore. I'm going by she, her pronouns now, and I want my breasts back. And they had to tell her that's not possible. She talks about how when it comes to, to parents' rights in some states, it seems that when it came down to a child saying that they wanted something versus a parent saying they didn't, the judges would sometimes rule in favor of the child. And she gives the example of one case of an 11-year-old child that the mother wanted to put her on hormone blockers or whatever it was that she was going to do. And the judge ruled in the favor of the mother, 11 years old. The father opposed it. When the head of Health and Human Services, a transgender person named Rachel Levine, told America that no kids were getting puberty blockers or transgender treatment that didn't need it or wasn't warranted for, Jamie Reed said that she was sickened and appalled because she had seen it firsthand. That wasn't true. And she tells the story in this article of multiple other cases where kids were put on this stuff and definitely shouldn't have been. Do we see what's happening? Do not be afraid to speak out about this. We've got to stop this. We can. I know so many people are afraid of saying anything because they're afraid of being called a transphobe. That is not what you are. Do not be afraid to speak out about this.